The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.
Hello, everyone. Welcome in, students of the game. My name is Alex Baumann, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Nathan Glidewell. And happy Thanksgiving to all of our listeners here, but let's hop right into some college football, Nathan, from this past weekend. The first game, starting with Alabama versus Chattanooga, really just a gimme game. Bama ended up winning that one 66-10. Nathan, you were at the game, so I'm going to let you take it away here, breaking down what you saw.
Be careful what you say about gimme games, Alex. I wouldn't be calling anything like this a gimme game. But Alabama does come out firing out of the gates. I think we scored on 8 of the 9 possessions opening. So as you can see, all things were clicking. Jalen Monroe took over with his arm, 13 of the 16, 197 yards and 3 touchdowns. He didn't play in the second half, so that's all you need to know about him. He took care of his business. I thought we ran the ball pretty well. Offensive line did a good job of creating holes. Looked very good in pass protection. And the wide receiver crew, everyone just seemed to get involved. I mean, you look at the number of people that got receptions, the number of people that got touchdowns. It was not to see so many people get involved, especially the seniors, given that it was senior day. I really want to focus more on the second half part of things. When Ty Simpson came in, I think there was a lot of bright things from him. He was 4.6, 50 yards through the air. He had the one long run for 78 yards. He dropped it at the goal line, and he definitely got chewed out by Nick Saban for that. Got to carry the ball through the end zone. But Ty Simpson definitely impressed me with what he was able to do with the few drives he got. Looked very poised in the pocket. The throws he made were excellent. And then Dylan Longren came in. Tyler Buckner, QB4 on the depth chart now.
No, not even QB4, QB5. Because he's got Eli Holstein.
Wow. Well, he'll be QB6 when Julian Tang comes in for bowl prep. So overall, Bama took care of business. The defense was excellent. I will mention Chris Braswell with his targeting instance. It was kind of half and half on targeting. The QB kind of just stood there and took it. I don't know why he didn't move or anything, but you got to keep your head up. Other than that, defense played pretty perfect, only allowing 10 points. There were a few big runs given up, especially later in the game. I don't know if that's just miscommunication between different groups of people or personnel. So that was fine. But Kool-Aid early on in the game, he had a punt return and he fumbled at the 10. It seems to be an every week thing for Kool-Aid. I don't know if he's lost his confidence. Nick Saban had something to say about that. But they plug in Caleb Downs and immediately he makes a huge impact and he scores a 85-yard punt return for a touchdown. Just excellent. Best thing I could see from him all day. He continues to probably be the best person to impress me on this team, at least defensively. I knew he was going to be good. I didn't know he was going to be this good. So I'm looking forward to see what he can do in his future. And sports noting, at this point in time, Will Reichert has 521 points total scored. So I believe that puts him 9 off tying the all-time record, which is 530 points from former Navy quarterback Keenan Reynolds. So I think with these next 2 games, he can definitely get it. I don't know. Maybe we'll just put him in at the 1-yard line and do a tush push for him. I would love to do that versus Auburn next week, but I don't know how that's going to go.
Yeah, let's go ahead and talk about Auburn, Nathan, because Lord have mercy, Auburn.
Oh, this is going to take the majority of the show up. I mean, what was this?
Let me just get this out of the way. Auburn hosted New Mexico State, paying him $1.85 million to come to the Plains, and New Mexico State beat them 31-10. And I don't believe Auburn led at any point in this game at all. Am I correct in that, Nathan?
They did not lead at all.
So it was just all around worst performance I've ever seen. I didn't watch the Louisiana Monroe Alabama game, so I can't say I got to witness that. So this is the worst loss I've ever seen in college football. Realistically, it's the worst. I don't know how you lose to New Mexico State, and I know they're what they were 8-3, 8-2 coming into this game, something like that. So they weren't terrible, but you're Auburn. You're in the SEC. You have all these talented players, and you don't even lead this in any point in this game, not once. You let New Mexico State just control the time of possession, control the game, play the way they wanted to, and you lost. Peyton Thorne, ineffective. I know he's 15-19, but only 148 yards and a touchdown. Didn't turn the ball over at all, which is a good thing. The rushing attack, pretty awful. Peyton Thorne's leading rusher, 38 yards. Jarquez Hunter, only 27 rushing yards. And that's saying something considering both these teams were top 10 in the country in rushing offense, and Auburn's offense didn't run the ball well. That's pretty baffling to me. The receivers, Tavares Johnson continues to be the go-to guy for Peyton Thorne, 46 receiving yards. Rafaldo Fairweather had 44 receiving yards and a touchdown. The defense for Auburn, forget about it. They made the New Mexico State quarterback look like Bryce Young in the pocket. I mean, I don't understand. Only had 1 sack, 4 TFLs, didn't force a turnover at all. The defensive line struggled to get pressure on the quarterback. The secondary didn't make the plays we're accustomed to them making. I don't know what was going on with Auburn. Then you look at New Mexico State. Had lost their first 27 meetings against SEC teams and had already clinched that spot in the Conference USA Championship against Liberty. And like I mentioned, their quarterback, Diego Pavia, he looked like Bryce Young. They list him at 6 feet tall on their roster. I doubt he's 6 feet tall. He's probably 5'10", 5'11". Maybe I'm going to have to go probably 5'10". He was 19-28, 201 yards, 3 touchdowns, then had 35 yards on the ground. The running back, Star Thomas, 67 rushing yards. The running back, Young, had 52. Then their gadget, Taysom Hill type player, Eli Stowers, had 19 rushing yards and had 48 receiving yards and a touchdown. The defense for New Mexico State outplayed Auburn's defense, had 4 sacks, 6 TFLs. And the thing for me is New Mexico State, I mean, it's kind of like Dan Campbell in the NFL, had the balls of steel here, man, and converted a fake punt in their own territory in the opening play of the fourth quarter. And they continued to run the ball and ran the clock out on a 16-play, 83-yard drive and took basically the entirety of that fourth quarter up and gave Auburn no chance. Nathan, people on Twitter and all that were saying, well, Nick Saban lost Louisiana Monroe his first season in Alabama. Look what he is now. Hugh Freeze, this is his Louisiana Monroe game. Well, if Hugh Freeze can win a national championship 2 seasons from now, maybe we can start, okay, maybe Hugh Freeze has got something, but Hugh Freeze is not even remotely the coach Nick Saban is. What did you see from this game that worries you for the future for Auburn and Hugh Freeze?
Number one, I'll tell you the difference between Nick Saban during that time and Hugh Freeze during this time. Nick Saban had already won a national championship at LSU before he came to Alabama. So we knew what Nick Saban was capable of. We knew that it was a fluke. Hugh Freeze has continued to struggle in his past. You look at his time in Ole Miss, he continued to struggle with bad teams and really just made his roster look like it was crap, even though there are a lot of good players on it. Auburn, man. I mean, New Mexico State beat them up and down the field, both sides of the ball. It didn't matter where you were looking because New Mexico State had their number this day. I don't even understand. I tuned into this game, and New Mexico State was up 7-0. I was like, that's surely going to change. It didn't. It didn't. Auburn didn't find anything to really build off of offensively other than Peyton Thorne scrambling out of the pocket because his offensive line can't block. The run game was non-existent. This must be the staple of your offense, and you cannot run the ball versus New Mexico State. I really don't understand Auburn. I don't, because they come off a 48-10 win versus Arkansas. It looked like they're putting it together.
Doors off of them.
I mean, they have been so consistent the past few weeks on the offensive end. I think they keep building and building, and then they come out and I mean, what is this? This is the product you put out on the field. You have, I don't know if they're looking ahead to the Iron Bowl or what, but honestly, if you're this bad of a team, you should not be taking a week like this for granted. And I don't know if Hugh Freeze is just that bad of a coach. Just said, you know what? We're just going to focus all our game prep on Alabama. We're going to spend 2 weeks on them. We don't have to worry about New Mexico State. Well, guess what? Yeah, you had to, because they just beat you. They dominated this game. It baffles me how New Mexico State was able to just control the whole game. They played how they wanted to play. They really didn't care what Auburn did offensively because they just had the answer for everything they did. I mean, Auburn didn't have a trip to the red zone. They didn't. That's horrible. New Mexico State doubled the amount of yards they had. In fact, New Mexico State had more rushing yards than Auburn had yards in general. That is probably the saddest thing I've ever heard. You pay them $1.8 million to come here and just bust your teeth in on national championship. I mean, people are just laughing at Auburn. It's a laughing stock. People think it's a circus now. I mean, and Hugh Freeze is the main clown ringleader behind all this. I get it, it's his first year. But if this is the type of product he's putting out in the field, Auburn fans need to go and trap themselves in. It's going to be a long journey. Should have never fired Gus Malzahn to begin with, because now you're just going to start shuffling through coaches like you have bad cards. Auburn fans, I don't have much to say for you. This is beyond disappointing. 31-10 in your own house. You paid him $1.8 million. I don't know if I've seen a worse loss in my life. And then you had the Iron Bowl next week. I had no words. I had no words, Alex. This has been crap. Next week, Auburn fans should be praying.
All I'm saying is Brian Harsin never lost to New Mexico State, and they fired him. So I'm just saying. Like I said, it's the worst loss I've ever witnessed in my entire life in college football. I don't know how you managed to lose this game. And it's not like you lost on a walk-off field goal or something. You didn't even get close to winning. You had no chance in this game. From the start of from the first kickoff to the last whistle, Auburn didn't stand a chance, apparently, which is crazy to me. Crazy.
There was no sense of urgency throughout this game. It just looked like everyone on Auburn's team just did not care. They didn't care when they got down. They didn't care when they got behind. It's like the offense just came around the field and saying, "Oh, we got to play offense again," and then they maybe pick up a first down, and then we came to fourth down. You know what we're gonna do? We're gonna punt the ball, and no one had a sense of urgency. And then they finally wake up with like 2 minutes left in the game. It's like, oh crap, we're about to lose. And while the whole stadium is completely empty around them, you have kids crying. People are just sitting there in disbelief, and Auburn's like, "What's going on right now?" Did New Mexico State give him a concussion or something?
The bars are definitely packed after this game. I can tell you that down there in Auburn, they're definitely packed out.
There is a lack of liquor in Auburn currently. I don't know. Maybe they could have spent the $1.8 million on a new shipment for every bar in the city, because it was rough. And if you thought this week was rough, I'm sure Auburn fans are going to be very disappointed next week, because if they couldn't run the ball versus New Mexico State, Lord knows they cannot run the ball versus Alabama. I don't know what kind of success we're going to have. I mean, they're going to have, but this is baffling. I have not seen. I expected a team like Rutgers to lose a game like this. I mean, you can take your pick of what other college would have lost this game. Syracuse would have lost this game.
Northwestern,
Northwestern,
Virginia Tech. All them schools.
The only school in the SEC that I would say is capable of losing this game would be Vanderbilt, and I wouldn't even let them get away with this, because this was just bad. This is terrible.
It's supposed to be a tune-up game. So what these games are quote-unquote tune-up games for their rivalry weekend, and you get blown out.
Yeah. I think the main thing for me is the fact that Alabama paid Chattanooga like $60K, I mean $60K, $600K or like $800K to come in, and Alabama took care of their business. Auburn pays a whopping almost $2 million to get their teeth beat in. So not only did you not budget well, you went and picked someone who was just gonna. I mean, I have no words to describe what New Mexico State did. I mean, it was pretty much like they put them in a body bag. Moving forward, Alex, what does Auburn do?
Well, you can't fire Hugh Freeze. I don't think you can fire him after just this one loss, because it's one of these circumstances where you fire Hugh Freeze, you're going to get to replace him that's going to do any better job. And I don't think you can fire, like I said, after just one loss. So I think you got to get back to the drawing board. You got to fire your offensive coordinator. I'm sorry, the dude's inept. I think a defensive coordinator, I think he's done fine all year, but this performance that he put out on the field was not great. But when your defense is down on the field 70% of the game, they're going to get pretty tired. So this game's not really on the defense as much as it is the offense. I don't think Hugh Freeze should take over the play calling duties because as a head coach, I think you should just be the head coach. You got to get a new quarterback, something. Peyton Thorne's not it. Robbie Ashford's not it. In the limited times I've seen Holden Garner come in the game, I don't think he's the answer either. So you got to get a quarterback in there. The running backs, I think you have a lot of talent at position, but when you don't run the football well, and you have a line that can block well, what can you do? I think the offensive line, you got a few young pieces on there like Connor Lew at center. Take a few years, probably a year to develop him, but I think their line is improving. The receivers, it's every week. Can't get open. When you are open, you drop passes, or Peyton Thorne just doesn't hit them in the hands, or doesn't have time to throw it to him. I think you got to get receivers coached up better. It's just all. I don't want to blame an entire side of the football because the defense, like I said, could get better, but the offense all season has been the reason they've lost. I would say all their games. Would you agree, Nathan?
Majority of the time, yes.
So I think the offensive coordinator has to go, and they got to find somebody else to replace him.
I look at this. There's no easy fix. I mean, like you said, you can't fire Hugh Freeze because this is his first year. You got to give him time to actually work with what he did recruiting wise.
He's a great recruiter.
Yeah, he can recruit great, but when it comes down to coaching, he just made no adjustments in this game. Like at some point, as a head coach, you need to take over and say, "This is what we're gonna do. This is how we're gonna do it, and then we're gonna take over this game." And Hugh Freeze just like didn't seem to get the memo or something. He came out at halftime talking about his team's care meter has to go up. I mean, that's not the halftime speech you need to give. Halftime speech you need to give would be lighting a fire under someone and telling them to go out there and play the way they should be playing and not losing to a New Mexico State team that definitely does not measure up talent-wise, facility-wise, money-wise, all of the above. And said they just didn't come out and do anything. So the offense has been the issue, like you said, Alex, majority of the year. Peyton Thorne, I knew coming into the season he was not going to be the answer. Robbie Ashford has not been the answer. He cannot throw the ball consistently. And Holden Garner, I don't know how well he's been developed because he's basically had just like divorced parents the whole time. Gets a new stepdad every other year. So I don't know how well he's been developed. I think it's fair to give him a shot, but at this point in the season, you have 2 games left. You had the Iron Bowl. I wouldn't start him versus Alabama. I wouldn't play him versus Alabama. And then your bowl game, which in order to keep recruits in ties to say, look, we made it to the bowl, you need to actually go out and perform and win the bowl game. I know that's hard for people to understand, that Hugh Freeze needs to understand to win the bowl game. Most likely the Birmingham Bowl. I made a joke about that last week. Not a joke anymore. Because I almost could bet the rest of the money in the bank account to say, hey, you're on to the Birmingham Bowl. Either that or the Music City Bowl. I don't know. We can start taking bets now. But I know Auburn wasn't going to be fixed in a year, but this is a very, very low spot. I mean, if even for Auburn. And through all the laughing I do and how funny it is to me that Auburn just got bounced by New Mexico State, there is a bit of worry as a Bama fan to say this week's Iron Bowl, they're going to be angry. But honestly, I don't know if they had the fire in them to do that. Because this is just disappointing.
Yeah, it really is. But I think we say this with a lot of other coaches. You got to be patient, and I don't think you have to say the same thing for Hugh Freeze. You got to be patient with him. And while this makes your patience run a little thin here, losing to New Mexico State, it's just the first season. And with every new head coach in their first season, there's going to be road bumps. There's going to be obstacles in the way. And he disturbed everyone, and he's got to get back up, and the team's got to get back up, and they got to keep going because it's a long ride. Auburn's always going to be fighting with other teams like Alabama, Georgia for recruits and for championships and SEC championship appearances. So they just got to keep powering away, keep moving, keep getting good recruits, and try to perform on the football field unlike they did this game. All right, moving on to UAB. They took on Temple for their last home game this season. It was senior night or senior day. They won 34-24. Jermaine Brown, the running back, had a career high rushing yards, 153 for that matter, and a touchdown. Team as a whole, I kind of called for it a couple of weeks. They ran the ball pretty well, 46 carries, 259 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's pretty inspiring to see them kind of return to what Bill Clark had them do back in the day. So I liked seeing that. Moving on to Jacksonville State, they took on Louisiana Tech, beat them 56-17. And Jacksonville State, even though they are bowl eligible, will be bowl eligible, kind of like James Madison. And when we get later in the podcast, we'll discuss that after we discuss these 2 games here. Number 5, Washington takes on number 11, Oregon State. 22-20, Washington wins this game. The Huskies were held scoreless in the second half. And you look at Oregon State, they had more first downs, more total yards, more passing yards, more rushing yards, more time possession than Washington, but still lost by 2 points, mostly due to DJ Uiagalelei's 2 interceptions. You look at Washington, like I said, held scoreless in the first half, or in the second half, sorry. Michael Penix wasn't great, wasn't the Heisman contender we were looking for in this game. 13-28, 162 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, then added 22 rushing yards and a touchdown on the ground. Dylan Johnson at running back, who's really been pretty good these past few weeks for the Huskies, had 89 rushing yards, did have a fumble loss, but he's been a breath of fresh air for that running back position. The wide receivers here, Roma Dunze, 7 receptions, 106 yards, 2 touchdowns. And the other notable receiver was Jack Westover with 4 receptions and 43 yards. The defense for Washington, I think, did pretty well. They only had the 1 sack, but they did have 7 TFLs. Really pressured DJ Uiagalelei. Had the 2 interceptions, both by Jabbar Muhammad. And then defensive lineman Braylon Trice had a sack and 2.5 TFLs. So I think the Washington defense has proven the past couple of weeks they can do pretty good things. Last week, holding Utah scoreless in the second half. And I know they kind of gave up a few points to Oregon State in the second half. But when they needed to bend, not break, and really dig down in the dirt and find something, they did. Held that offense off for that final drive. You look at Oregon State, DJ Uiagalelei, Nathan. I mean, it feels like every time this guy gets in a big moment, he just craps his pants and he just can't do it. It's just like the lights get too bright. It's not for him.
He reverts back to his Clemson days, Alex. Because I mean, this was the game Oregon State was going to upset Washington. They had them. It was there. It was there. They had it. You could see what was going to happen. All the momentum was Oregon State's way. They marched down to the red zone sometime in the fourth quarter, and they had the ball to take the lead. Instead, they had to settle for a field goal. You got to credit Washington's defense there for bending and not breaking. But still, you should have had some momentum off that. You get the ball back from Washington, and then they proceeded to do probably one of the most stupidest things I've seen, and that's basically take up the rest of the clock and then not convert. They got the ball with like 8 minutes back. I mean 8 minutes left. And I guarantee they started within their own 5, but by the time they reached midfield, they were like 3 minutes left, and I was like, what are y'all doing, dude? I mean, you want to give yourselves more possessions, not less. And I guess they were trying to take it the final possession, but it did not work out well because when it came down to converting on 4th down, DJ's pass got batted down, and that was basically the game at that point because they just did not convert. I think that was a stupid play call. I think the whole series, just putting all your chips into one series was stupid. Because it basically lost in the game. I think if they actually had tried to air the ball out more, you got to trust in your defense because your defense held them scoreless in the second half. They were able to get after Michael Penix and really control what Roma Dunze was able to do early on in the game or early on in the second half. So I just did not like how they performed on that final drive, really. And that just comes down to coaching. But Oregon State, really, I never thought they were going to be in this type of situation beginning the season. So you got to give them credit for how hard they fought. It was a very physical game. The elements were all over the place. I know I wouldn't have wanted to play in the game like that. Like almost freezing temperatures, pouring down rain, muddy, windy.
Yeah.
Typical Northwest crap game. And I really thought Oregon State was going to take care of business. They just come short. Washington, I think they're a good team, but I think there are limits to how good they are. And Michael Penix has started to be a little inconsistent. I don't know if he's going to be the quarterback that can lead his team to winning a playoff game or winning a national championship, because there obviously has to be some sort of dependency on him. And he has shown in some of these games that he is a little unreliable. So I don't know what that's supposed to Washington, but they got a very big one on the road that improves their resume a lot. And I believe that clinches them a spot in the Pac-12.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah. So the only other team will be Oregon, and funny enough, Oregon State will play Oregon on Friday, I believe, of this week. So that basically decides. I know Oregon State's eliminated, but that basically decides who goes. I believe it's between Oregon and Arizona right now. But as of right now, if Washington and Oregon played again, I don't know who I'd have. I mean, it's almost like honestly like flipping a coin. But man, this was the game to be an upset, and it just wasn't.
Yeah, talking about the game that could have been an upset, Nathan. Number 3, Michigan taking on Maryland at Maryland. Michigan won that game 31-24, but it really wasn't that close till late in the game. Maryland made a pretty good comeback attempt that was short because Talia Tagovailoa, the quarterback for the Terrapins, was under pressure and threw the ball at the 1-yard line, and they called it intentional grounding. So it was a safety, and that was basically the game. A lot of people on Twitter were saying it wasn't a safety. There was a receiver in the vicinity, but the ball kind of hit the ground of a few yards in front of him. But I don't really, I don't know the vernacular of what the rule of intentional grounding reads. I'm not a referee rules specialist here. I'm not Dean Blandino or anybody like that, or Gene Sarator. But I personally didn't think it was intentional grounding. Nathan, you're saying you didn't think it was intentional grounding either?
No, watching the game, and Tulia pressure out of his mind in this game. I mean, I don't know how many, like 4 sacks for the Wolverines in this game. So he's been pressure out of his mind. But when you're backed up against your own, I don't know, end zone, I believe they're at like
one.
Yeah, they're at the 1. So it's having to make split second decisions in this game. And Tulia had thrown towards the receiver. It's not like he was just panicking and he had just thrown it into the dirt. He had thrown it towards the receiver. Guaranteed the ball didn't go as far as it needed to. But he was throwing towards the receiver. And in my mind, if you're avoiding intentional grounding, you're throwing towards the receiver or you're outside the pocket throwing the ball away. And I felt like it reached the criteria to say, Tulia is throwing in this direction to this receiver that's right here. And you can see Mike Loxley making the case for it. And I thought he had a pretty good case because it's not like the receiver couldn't have made the catch. I think if the ball was a little bit better, the receiver could have made the catch. He could have dove for it and he could have gotten the ball. So in that place, he's in the area and he's being targeted. I think it was a poor job by the refs. It really swayed the turn of the game because Maryland was making a comeback. Maryland's defense had got a stop and gotten the ball back. And that one play right there changed the whole aspect of the game because they awarded Michigan 2 more points on a 2-point conversion really that they missed earlier. I don't know why they went for it. But they got the ball back also, and they just ran the clock out. So the refs really just took over the game. And it was poor to see because Michigan really struggled in this game. J.J. McCarthy looked like crap. He has looked like crap for 2 weeks in a row now. And
he's missing his daddy, Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah, and they continue to rely on Blake Corum. At what point does his motor stop? I mean, at what point do people figure out, hey, this is all we need to do to stop Michigan? It's right there. I thought Michigan's defense played decently well. But I think there are a bunch of flaws as well. It was Maryland, and you almost let them come back and win. Ohio State, you look at what they did with Maryland. They took care of business. Guaranteed it was early on in the game that they were fighting with them, but they took care of their business in the second half. And I don't like
Yeah.
to compare games. There's no transfer of property between games, and I can say look at one team did versus this team. This is what you should have done. But I'm just saying, Michigan in this late in the season, you need to be building momentum. You need to be building momentum going into the game. And even with the win here, it felt like there was not a lot of momentum to be carried in. Being backed up on your toes like this is not a good way to go into playing a team like Ohio State. So valiant effort, Maryland. I think they're a good team. They have been a good team for some time now, but they're just when it comes down to moments like this, they struggle to put teams away or to take the lead. Toya has been a good quarterback. He made a lot of mistakes in this game. And you got to credit to the Maryland defense, even though they came up short. I really thought they had Michigan in duress. So, but moving forward, it's going to be a very interesting game to see Michigan take on Ohio State.
Yeah, like I said last week, in Michigan and Ohio State, more Michigan right now. I mean, if Michigan played Alabama or Georgia and they're playing like this, I don't think it's close. I mean, JJ McCarthy without Jim Harbaugh, he looks terrible. I don't know if he has no confidence or what. I know they're trying to run the ball more. I know that like the discrepancies, like they're running the ball like 70% of the 80% of the time now. But still, I mean, he's got to have some sort of confidence, especially going, like you said, Nathan, into the game against Ohio State. He was not great. And if you're playing Ohio State and you can't throw the football, you're going to be in for some trouble. They got some studs in the defensive line. Their linebacker, Tommy Eichenberg's pretty good. So if they just stack that box and you can't run the football, well, what can you do? It's kind of like, I don't want to say Michigan's Auburn because Michigan didn't lose to New Mexico State, but Auburn relies a lot on their run game. Michigan relies a lot on their run game. And if you can't run the ball, we saw with Auburn, I mean, they've struggled multiple games. Michigan, you're going to play Ohio State. If you can't run the football, are you going to struggle? Is your offense going to sputter out of control? Your defense, I know they've kind of basically won you this game. Had 2 interceptions from Mike Sanders still. Had the fumble recovery for a touchdown. Had the 2 safeties, one of which we went over with the into the game with the intentional grounding. So, I mean, the defense, in essence, won y'all this game, continue to give you good field position. But you're going to go against Ohio State's offense, which I don't think is the greatest thing in the world, but you have Marvin Harrison Jr., who's one of the best wide receivers in the country. You got Kyle McCord at quarterback, who's okay. He's not going to light you on fire, but he's pretty good. And you got other receivers, Emeka Ibukum, Kate Stover at tight end. So the defense isn't going to be able to do what they did against Maryland against Ohio State, I don't think. So Michigan's got to get prepared for the game. And I don't know at this point if they're going to have what they need to beat Ohio State. Do you think they do, Nathan?
I'm not going to make that call right now. It's too early to tell. If I had to lean to a team right now, I'm thinking Ohio State, even on the road, has a bad taste in their mouth, and they don't want to make it 3 in a row for Michigan. So I would almost guarantee that Ohio State is going to come out and they're going to come out and be scrappy. So I think that's going to be the difference in the game. Also, Michigan doesn't have Jim Harbaugh, and that's going to make a huge difference in a game like this. So
yeah,
I guess I'd pick Ohio State.
Okay, so we're both picking Ohio State there. All right, moving on to some upsets. You had Clemson beating number 20 North Carolina 31-20. It feels like North Carolina every year they started the season hot, and it's the end of the season. Mac Brown, everybody else just taps their pants and forgets football's a thing. Drake May, I've not been impressed with him this season. Kind of similar to a guy like Caleb Williams. He was 16-36, 209 yards, a touchdown, and an interception. It's like him and Caleb Williams are looking too far ahead to the NFL draft or something. I don't know. They just haven't impressed me this entire season. That's something you would expect a number 1 overall, or in Drake May's case, probably would be number 1 overall pick, but you know, a top 5 pick to do. It just hasn't been there. I don't know what's going on with either of those guys. Then James Madison ended up losing to Appalachian State 26-23 in overtime. Nathan, it was word this week, you know, James Madison submitted that waiver as well as Jacksonville State, and NCAA denied the waivers for them to be bowl eligible, play in their conference championship and all that stuff. And James Madison came out, and the attorney general of that state said, you know, well, we're going to take legal action against the NCAA, and we're going to sue for our right to play in a bowl game here. Do you think things? I think you answered this last week, but you do agree that James Madison and Jacksonville State should be eligible to play in a bowl game, correct?
Yeah, I think they should be eligible, but you also got to think rules are rules at this point in time. You see, the NCAA is holding on to the little power it has at the current state of college football. So they're going to take it out on the little man. They will. You look at what they did with Tez Walker. They didn't have a problem doing that to him. So why would they have a problem doing it to James Madison or Jacksonville State? At the end of the day, I think they should be able to play in bowl games. It's going to be a lot more entertaining to than a team like Auburn. Yeah, I found a fair out the team that wasn't. I don't want to watch in a bowl game. But you also got to take care of your business moving forward. You can't just have all that talk and then come out and lose at Appalachian State while College Game Day is there.
College Game Day was pretty good, though. I tell you what, that's one of the best ones I've ever seen.
You know, Alex, I didn't watch it. I've actually gotten out of the habit of watching College Game Day. It's kind of went downhill. But you got to give credit to Appalachian State. They just keep crushing everyone's dreams.
All right, some other storylines from the past week. Number 1, Georgia demolished number 18 Tennessee 38-10 and became the first team to go unbeaten in the SEC 3 years in a row since the league went into an 8-game schedule in 1992. And then for the Volunteers, they fought a 7-4 and 3-4 in the SEC. Not the season Josh Heupel wanted to have after what they did last season. I believe it was a 10-win season, Nathan, with Hendon Hooker at quarterback. Joe Milton just hasn't been the answer they were expecting. He's been like Michigan Joe Milton, not the Joe Milton we saw last year in the bowl game against Clemson. It's been pretty depressing to see, even as a Bama fan and hating Tennessee. But I want to see them find some success because when Tennessee's better, I think college football is a little bit better. Number 7, Texas escaped another scare as they beat Iowa State 26-16. The Cyclones had 9 net rushing yards with an average of 0.4 yards per carry. Texas,
the game.
Is every week it's like Texas, this is going to be the game they lose, and they don't. They just continue to squeak by and continue to contend for this college football playoff. They just get lucky week after week. The thicker kicker, Harrison Mevis, nailed a 30-yard field goal with 5 seconds left to secure the 33-31 win for Missouri over Florida. The Gators must beat Florida State next week to reach bowl eligibility, but the bad news for the Gators is Graham Mertz, their quarterback, left the game with a significant collarbone injury, so he probably won't.
He'll be out.
He'll be out. So Florida's got to beat Florida State. But talking about Florida State, they beat North Alabama this week 58-13, but they lost their starting quarterback Jordan Travis for the rest of the season after he suffered a severe leg injury. And he tweeted earlier today when we're recording this video that his career at Florida State's over. So there will be no Jordan Travis for Florida State against Florida, or if they make the college football playoff after playing Louisville in that ACC championship, it won't happen. Number 10, Louisville clinched a spot in the ACC championship game against Florida State, as I mentioned, after the 38-31 win against Miami. Louisville's looked pretty good this season, been pretty impressed their first year under Jeff Brom, so I think they're turning in the right direction. Number 17, Arizona dominated number 22, Utah, 42-18, but a good thing for the Utes is their starter quarterback, Cam Rising, who has missed this entire season, announced he will return next year. So a good thing for the Utah Utes there. Number 21, Kansas came back to beat number 25, number 21, Kansas State came back to beat number 25, Kansas, 31-27. Pretty depressing. Kansas was on their third string quarterback, had the lead the majority of the game, and then got late, and they just couldn't get it done, couldn't close the deal. Colorado stood no chance against Washington State as the Buffaloes lost 56-14 and fell to 4-7 and then 1-7 in the conference on the season. Not the season that Deion Sanders was hoping for up in Colorado. UCLA handed USC their 5th loss of the season with a 38-20 win over the Trojans. USC dumpster fire program. It's just awful up there. And then the last thing to note here is Arkansas announced Sam Pittman will return as the head football coach next season, despite this atrocious year they've been having with KJ Jefferson at quarterback. And then this is the Heisman tracker as we close out the show today. Quarterback Bo Nix for Oregon, 24-29, 404 yards, 6 touchdowns, all in the first half, and tied an Oregon single-game passing touchdown record, that all in the first half. So pretty good for Bo Nix, and he didn't turn the ball over at all. Then LSU quarterback Jane Daniels, 25-30, 413 passing yards, 6 touchdowns, no interceptions, then added 96 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. So it looks like it's just really a two-man race at this point as we're closing out the season between Bo Nix and Jaden Daniels. We will see who ends up getting that award. Jaden Daniels probably has the stats, but you never know what the award voters are going to see. I mean, they want to have a quarterback that's going to be contending for the college football playoff, or a quarterback that has the stats and has played better than Bo Nix has stats.
Or you could look at the strength of the schedule that the quarterbacks have played. That would also help. Jaden Daniels had a much harder schedule. Bo Nix has been playing. I don't know how to describe some of the teams he's been playing, but Pac-12 outside of a few teams has been pretty bad.
Yeah. All right, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for listening to Students of the Game.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.